let's have a look at how we do research for level 3 statistics. So the first thing we want to think about is the fact that we've got two types of research, what we call primary research and secondary research. So the primary research, that's what we are going to be doing some of, and what you've been doing in this introduction booklet. That's when you go out and collect the data yourself. So you go and collect the data yourself, you go and analyse those questionnaires, and you analyse the observational data yourself. So you're going from the raw data and understanding the data straight. So you're going straight to the source. Secondary research, that's what we're going to do before we begin the investigation. So that's looking for background information. So that's when we use that information to predict what we might find when we analyse the data itself. So the research process. So this is our process. So the first step is to do some background research. Then we're going to go and write our investigation questions. We've got to find a search strategy. So that's looking at the main ideas. Then we come down and research our investigation question. We need to evaluate that research. We've got to look at that research that we gather and talk about how good that research actually is. Then we need to select our references. Then we go on to organise the information, and then we can present our report. So when we want to evaluate the report, so that's step number 5 in this one. Okay, step number 5 is evaluating your research. I found this little diagram which I think is quite useful to use these ideas to think about whether or not your research is useful or valid. Okay, so we start, one of the things that you can look at is this idea of currency. Okay, so that's looking at when the data was published. So for example, is it current? So if the data, if the information that I'm looking at on Google has been published back in 1995, is that still relevant today? If I'm talking about the heights of children, that may well still be relevant. If I'm talking about how much people use their phones for, then it's not so relevant. If we're looking at a particular website, when was the website itself last updated? All right, so those are a couple of things that we want to think about in terms of currency. Another thing we want to look for is the relevance. Does that information we've got, is that relevant to your topic? Or does it help you answer your question in any way? Are the issues covered in depth by the source? All right, or is it just very surface level stuff? So is the content at an appropriate level? So if we're talking about an academic kind of essay or assessment, is it scholarly enough? I don't want us to go back to the using the sources that young children might. We do need to be a little bit more advanced than some of that. But also thinking about who is the intended audience. Okay, so you think about who you are writing this presentation and report for, and that's so you've got to be able to use appropriate levels of scientific and business and social sciences knowledge in order to be able to explain what's happening in statistics. Okay, so another idea is this idea of authority. So looking at who is the author or publisher or source of that report, because that can be quite important. If I know, for example, it's been published by Statistics New Zealand, or they are a branch of the government that are employed to gather and analyse statistics for the country. So I would trust any sources of data that comes from there, any reports that come from there. However, if I was talking about a media report that talked about how a particular company was the best company ever because they'd done a survey that suggested da-da-da-da, I might be less inclined to believe that, okay? Because particularly if the company themselves is paid for the research, there's some leeway that goes on there. I want to think about what the author's credentials are or the organisation affiliations. So if it's been published by somebody at a university that's well respected, then I'm much more inclined to believe the research. If it's been done by somebody in their backyard with a way out idea, I'm not so inclined to believe it. Okay. If we are doing journal articles, and I'm not too worried about this particular one, are they peer-reviewed or refereed? And things like that. All right. Another idea is this idea of accuracy. So that's looking at where does the information come from? How accurate is it? Is it from a government, an educational body, commercial organisation, or an individual? So how accurate is it? How much do we trust that source? Does it have links to other reliable sources on that topic? Can we verify that information? And that's often called triangulating. So looking at the accuracy of what we've got. And another aspect is looking at the purpose. So what is the website that I'm reading, excuse me, what is their purpose? If, for example, if it is a medical, say it's the Mayo Clinic, then their purpose is to help educate and inform the general public to use services, but they are there with the primary focus of sharing valid, accurate medical information with people. Okay, so their purpose would be to inform other people. Whereas if I went to Coca-Cola's website, they are there to try and promote their product. That's their whole purpose, is they want you to buy more of their product, buy into their business. So they have a different kind of purpose. Looking carefully at whether their information is fact or fiction or opinion, and whether that point of view is objective and impartial or not. Okay, so there's a bunch of pieces of lenses, if you like, that you want to look at any website through. So plagiarism, just a quick little note. When we're talking about plagiarism, you must rewrite this in your own words or summarize the research that you do. If you plagiarize, and what that means, plagiarize means that when you write something down, treating it as if it was your own words. So for example, like I've written those couple of sentences there, if I was to go into, say I was a different person, so I was student A, and I go on and start writing, it is extremely important that whatever research you find ... and I copy that whole thing out word for word, and then I hand it in as if this was my own work, pretending that it was my own writing. That is what plagiarism is. If we are to put it in quotes and then put a little note, so I might add a little footnote number 1, and I might say, right, that has been taken from Liz Snedden and da-da-da-da. I can explain where that's come from. Okay, so I can give the website link, or I can give the book reference or something. All right, and while quotes are occasionally useful, I don't want you to be doing a lot of quoting. I actually want you to be rewriting this in your own words. So let's have a look at an example going through this entire process. Okay, so let me remind you. Step 1 is to do some background research about the topic. So in this topic, the background research, the topic is about doing a wall sit. All right, so now I want to break that down a little bit more specifically. So in order to do a wall sit, what do we need? Well, my thinking is that we need to have really good, strong core muscles, and we need to have good quad muscles to help us with that. So I'm going to start looking at some images and try and figure out what muscles are being used. And that's when I go and find these diagrams, and I can read from the research and things that it looks like the quadriceps are the main muscles, and also glutes and abdominals. So I identified that maybe it was the abdominal muscles, but I hadn't identified the glutes. So that's something else that I need to take into account. So there's some background research, just kind of finding out more about what is involved in a wall sit, what muscles are involved. Then the next step is to write your investigation question. So in that, we want to write a purpose, and we want to define any variables that we have. So my question might be, I wonder if stretching before doing a wall sit will cause my Stats 3 students to last longer. So now I need to think purpose. Who wants to know about how long a Year 13 student can do a wall sit for? Who would that information be useful to, and why would it be useful to them? So one of my thoughts was that personal trainers or sports people, they would be interested in knowing about wall sits and knowing about how that's going to help them to develop muscles and strength in those particular areas. So I've given a purpose there. They want to know when to recommend doing a wall sit and whether or not they should advise people to stretch before doing that exercise. So is stretching beforehand going to help do the wall sit or not? So that's defining my purpose. Who would want to know and why would they want to know? So then I need to look into my variables. So you've got the little table here, and this little table is just the data that we collected. So we've got a variable as one the first name, last name is another variable, age is another variable, gender, Stats 3 teacher, experimental group, and wall sit time. All of those are variables, okay? So we've got 7 different variables there. Now I need to choose which of those variables I'm actually going to use for this investigation question. So the question was talking about, I wonder if stretching before doing it will cause them to last longer. So I need to look at the stretching, and so I need to know what group they were in, were they in the control group or the stretching group, and I need to know the time, how long it's going to take them to do this. So that's what I'm going to choose as my variables. I'm going to look at what group they were in, so was it in the control group or the stretching group, and I'm going to look at the wall sit time. And I've been quite specific, it's the time that students were able to hold that wall sit position for and the units of it. Okay, so that's step 2. Step 3 is finding some kind of search strategy. So what that means is I need to think about, what information do I want to know more about? So I want to know more information about what those muscles are that are involved and what affects those muscles. Okay, so kind of going deeper into the muscles and saying, right, well, what can I find out about those particular muscles? And I also want to find out more information about stretching. How does that connect to muscles? Will that help it? Will it not help it? Let me unpack that more. So step 4, I'm going on researching my investigation question, and part of that is to also make a prediction. So I've gone and done some research, and I've found out that they use wall sits as an exercise to strengthen quad muscles that in sports that require strong leg muscles. And some, for example, ice hockey and sailing both require strong leg muscles. I found some research that talked about how it's a good exercise for building endurance. And quad muscles help their joint strength, their jumping ability, and running acceleration. So particularly 100-metre runners, we know that they've got very large and strong quad muscles. Now, I found some information as a side part that hamstring muscles, they're on the back of your leg, and they are used for stabilising the hip and knee joints. So I also found some info about core muscles, that they hold you in position, and so they are quite good for balancing. So I've gone and researched about some of the muscles. I've found out a bit more, gathered some data. Then I also wanted to go and research about stretching. So I found out that when you stretch, the blood flow to your muscles increases. When you exercise, again, that also increases the blood flow to your muscles. And by stretching, you increase your range of motions in your joints. So that's elongating the muscles and it's improving your flexibility. So that's gone and done some research into what stretching might do. So now I'm going to combine all of that information together to try and make some kind of prediction. And so I'm going to suggest that if they do stretch before they do a wall sit, I think that's going to help them stay longer in their wall sit. And the reason for that is because their muscles are going to get warmed up because they've got greater blood flow. Okay, and so if you've got greater blood flow into the area, you've got better endurance, and so you're going to last longer in the wall sit. All right, so I've directly connected the research about and predicted, I think, that those who stretch will be able to stay in position longer, and given a reason why. Step 5. Now I need to evaluate my information. So when I did a Google search, I just went to the first 3 websites that came up. Okay, but when I looked at those in more details, I found that some of the information was 2012, and now I'm starting to wonder, is that still relevant? Has there been more relevant information that's come out since then? One of the websites I went to was Wikipedia. So do I feel I can trust that completely? Well, I know Wikipedia, anybody can write on those pages, so I'm not 100% certain about all of the information on that web page. One of the other websites I went to, they were trying to sell me fitness apps, and so because they were trying to sell me their product, a fitness app, that means that they could be biased in any information they put up there. So I have some concerns about the validity of the research, and therefore I need to find some more trustworthy sources to challenge or verify that information. Alright, so I've looked at those websites that I got the information on, and now I'm evaluating how much am I going to use this information. Do I need to go and keep looking for better information? So then, once I've done that, step 6 is to select all of my references. And you can see that what I've done is I've made a little reference list. That these are the particular websites I've gone to and found out information. Okay. Step number 7 is to organise that information. And this is when you're going to write up a summary of your own. Now, I'm not giving you an example here, because I think it's actually important you try writing this up in your own words to see what you can come up with. And the last step is presenting that report. And again, I won't do that here. There are some tips about presentations later on.